What's up, friends? Welcome back to the show. Today we are doing a Q&A solo cast. So I polled our lovely audience on Instagram and pulled out some of the best questions to answer. And we go a little bit all over the place today. We talk about increasing appetites on animal-based, thoughts on bread, what we think about root canals, what we can do as husbands and partners of our pregnant wives to step up and support them. So we're just going to get right stuck in today. And if you're paying close attention and watching us on YouTube, let us know what you think about our new studio setup. Doesn't it look nice? We'd love to hear what you think. And if you don't check us out on YouTube, you should be checking us out because we do this beautiful video production as well. So with enough of that, let's get right into the show. Today's first question is from Orb's Life, submitted through Instagram. Is it normal for my appetite to skyrocket on animal-based diet? It's insatiable, many exclamation points, but I love AB. So Orb's Life, I think that this can go both ways, and I think this is a really wonderful problem to have because what I think is usually happening is well over 50% of the population has micronutrient deficiencies or inadequacies. And you could argue that that's a very conservative low number when you square it with the CDC's data that 88% of the US adult population is metabolically unwell. And it's probably hard to be metabolically unwell whilst also being nutrified. So what I think is usually happening for people that experience this, they're coming from something like the standard Western diet, the SAD diet, the standard American diet, which not only is inadequate in micronutrients and minerals, but is also in excess amounts of the foods that drive stress, oxidative stress, which will further deplete those minerals, which will burn through antioxidants like vitamin C, and just don't really provide anything in the way of usable nutrition. And I think this explains why we have this paradigm in our culture of overfed but undernourished. Like we have a lot of people walking around that carry too much body fat on their bodies, which is again putting stress on their organs and the joints and things like that, which is an abundance problem, which doesn't really make sense, right? We evolved in scarcity. We now live in times of abundance, and we have people with excess body fat, which is an evolutionary adaptation, actually helped us to survive. Now it's working against us in these environments of abundance, DoorDash, 7-Elevens on every corner, etc. So they're overfed, but they're undernourished. They have excess body fat, but they are starving internally for anything that looks like nutrition. So when you start to come over to something like a real food diet, something like an animal-based diet, and you're getting real protein, you're getting real animal fats. By virtue of being on an animal-based diet, you're removing much of the things that drive that stress, inflammation, dysregulation of appetite. So the seed oils are kicked out, the gluten-containing grains are gone, the refined sugars, the high fructose corn syrup, the artificial ingredients. Hopefully you're sourcing good quality stuff, which is minimizing your exposure to things like herbicides and pesticides and glyphosate. Not only is your body really lighting up, it's actually getting usable nutrition for potentially the first time in your adult life. And in my estimation, what's probably going on here is your body is trying to re-nutrify itself. It's trying to compensate for a long time spent in a nutrient devoid state. And it's telling you to stay in that forager mindset of go get more food, eat. It's getting a signal, finally, of abundance instead of scarcity. And if you are having insatiable appetite and enjoying this, and your health is moving in the right direction whilst you're eating a lot of food, I think that's a win-win-win. I think that's the best case scenario you could be in. I think the most sustainable path to optimal health and fat loss is to be able to eat as much food as you possibly can while still meeting your goals and your health requirements. So I think this is a good problem to have. I have a feeling that what is happening here is your body is loving you for feeding it the food that it loves, and it's just asking for more of it. So just continue to move through the steps, eat those organs, remove the processed foods, prioritize your protein, and then leverage in the other steps in the animal-based framework, which isn't just about food, but is about movement and habits and light and stress management and sleep. Because this rabbit hole is deep and you've opened Pandora's box and it's a wonderful one. So just keep enjoying the ride. If you can eat a lot of food and maintain your health and get healthier, that's a win-win-win. You're in a pro-metabolic state. Your thyroid and your metabolism are ramping up with you, and that's something that will stay with you for the long haul. So I think that's a good thing. So keep kicking butt, Orb's Life. I think that's just kind of par for the course. Some people have a different experience, but it seems to be working and you love it. So don't change a thing, my friend. Next question. I am Greer. Thoughts on sourdough? So sourdough is a bread, and of course we all love, or did love at one point in our lives, I'm sure, a crunchy slice of bread with a big pat of butter on it, maybe some runny eggs, and you'll be hard-pressed to find somebody that wouldn't be a sourdough enjoyer from time to time. And I think that sourdough really is the closest thing we've got to real bread. It's 4 ingredients. It's water, flour, yeast, and salt. It's alive because that yeast is in a slow fermentation process. My wife bakes sourdough, and you open the top and it's living and it's bubbling and it's alive and it has smells and it responds to changes in the atmosphere, the microbiome of the house. It's really an alive food. Now, contrast that with the bread that you pick up on the supermarket shelf, which will probably have 25 plus ingredients, preservatives, etc. That's why it can sit in that bag for weeks on end without going stale or rotten. So it's definitely more akin to the bread that we would have evolved to eat upon the dawn of kind of domestication of plants, when we started to, use this process 10-ish thousand years ago. There's still a case to be made that yes, sourdough does contain gluten and it does contain plant matter, and that plant matter, if it's non-organic, could have pesticide residue on it, glyphosate again. It could also cause issues at the gut microbiome level because it does contain gluten and things that could potentially disrupt gut function. And at the same time, there are many people that will report gluten sensitivity that can enjoy a real sourdough, a quality sourdough. And this has a lot to do with this long fermentation process where some of the gluten proteins, the problematic proteins and the gliadins that come from that, are pre-digested by the living elements of this food. So you have to ask, where does this fit into your diet and your lifestyle? If you can eat it and you really enjoy it, and it doesn't cause you digestive distress, and you feel great, and it allows you more enjoyment, well, why not? Technically, would it be an animal-based approved food? No, but this is about maximizing the scope, the range, and the enjoyment, and eating the most diverse range of foods that allow you to thrive. I could have a very easy answer if you said, what about bread? White bread from the supermarket shelf. It's a pretty hard no. There's nothing in that that's beneficial. But the slow fermentation of sourdough, not only is it delicious, but it keeps and preserves the vitamins and the minerals that are in there, and it allows people a little bit more diversity with their diet. So if it's working for you, I don't see too much of a problem with it. I do eat sourdough. I don't eat sourdough every day. Sometimes my wife will bake 2 loaves in a weekend and we'll have more, and sometimes she'll go a month without baking sourdough and we'll have less. So it's kind of intuitive. It's really delicious. I am a person that grew up with celiac-like problems. I would get psoriasis flare-ups, itchy patches on my elbows and scalps if I ate conventional grain, pizza, normal breads, bagels, wraps, etc. I seem to do really, really well with sourdough. And there are levels to the sourdough game. Is the flour organic? Is it milled by a machine, or is it stone ground or hand ground, right? There are layers to how much quality this can be. So my wife gets a organic, small farm, local, stone milled, organic flour, everything. She's got an ancient yeast starter that's got all of this, good juju in it and all of that stuff. So it's about as good as bread can be. And again, I think that if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, maybe you're still healing. Maybe you have seriously compromised gut function, and maybe you need to back off a little bit. But I think there is a time and a place where most people could get to a point where they could reintroduce something like sourdough into their diet, because we've got to remember it's not always about removal and what's good or bad. Another sign of health is resilience. And if you are wrecked by a piece of bread to the point where you're having crazy IBS flare-ups, there's a lack of resilience there. Maybe we need to fix that. And maybe in fixing that, we bring in more foods over the long haul. I think that's a good long-term philosophy around foods, is eating more foods, not less, as long as those foods that you're including are increasing health and diversity and not robbing you of it. So, sourdough, team sourdough, yes or no? Let me know in the comments. Miath Rand, hope I'm pronouncing that right. What do you think about root canals? I have suffered severely for 5.5 years after root canals. And she went on to expand a little bit more in the DMs that she's having a really hard time in her home country, which I believe was Switzerland, of finding a dentist that would pull and resolve this issue. Now, I must admit, Miath, and I must say thank you. You sent me down quite the rabbit hole on this in preparation, because I was only very acutely aware that there could be some potential problems after root canals. And that was only because of investigating some of the other things that we do in the dental industry that can cause problems. Like myself, currently, I do have mercury amalgam fillings in my teeth left over from when I was a kid. And I'm aware now that that's probably not a good thing to have in your mouth. You might be leaching and microdosing mercury every single day of your life. So it's one of my big vision things to get those removed by a biological dentist. So I'm aware that some of the things we do in oral medicine, dentistry, are akin to some of the things we do in conventional medicine, which we talk about a lot of the time as we propose different holistic solutions, not always going to the pill, the potion, the needle, etc. So I've had to consolidate everything that I've learned about this in the last few days, and I've made some notes, and let me take you on a bit of a journey with me as I read through some of these. The really wonderful thing about this is a prominent figure that we've talked about a lot on this podcast and is really well renowned in this space enters the fray again, and this person is Dr. Weston A. Price. Now, you might be familiar with that name because he really kind of popularized in the early 1900s because of his visits and his voyages to these far-reaching lands of finding indigenous populations that they didn't have toothbrushes, they didn't have fluoridated water, they didn't have toothpaste, they didn't have processed food. They ate the species-appropriate diet, the human diet that was regional to them. So some of them skewed more heavily to this, more heavily to that, depending on the regions. But they almost always, no, not almost always, they always consumed animal protein, nose to tail, organs. They had certain rituals in those cultures where they would preserve the organs for the affirmed or the elderly or the pregnant or the children because they prioritized nutrient density. Weston A. Price is quoted in his books that he often saw the muscle meat being thrown away sometimes to the dogs that were used to facilitate hunts because people prized the organs much more so. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about here, eat your organs, comes from a lot of this expose of not only the ancestral wisdom that's inbuilt within us, but the work of Weston A. Price. And he popularized so many things like his X-factor vitamins, the importance of vitamin A. He also followed up his research by going back to these places when they had been reintroduced to industrialized foods, packaged foods. And this is where he would find cavities, gum diseases, and diseases of autoimmune conditions, etc. Whereas these cultures and peoples that he was visiting before so had beautiful white teeth, no cavities, no gum diseases, and they had nothing like a dentist. And it shows you an inherent lesson here, which is maybe your teeth and maybe all of our teeth would be really good, clean, perfect, big wide smiles, big broad faces if we were all raised in a natural way, eating natural foods like breast milk, and then on a species-appropriate diet, and then breathing well and all of that stuff. But I didn't know that Weston A. Price, who is a dentist, actually did a lot of these experiments here with the root canal stuff as well. So in the early 1900s, he led a group of 60 scientists over the course of about 15 years to investigate this problem of kind of bacteria, what's going on in the mouth, what we can be doing. And what now is known as the American Dental Association was so impressed with his work that they appointed Dr. Price as the research director. He was really well respected and lauded in this field. Now, unfortunately, that very valuable information that we'll uncover is now kind of buried and discredited. Weston A. Price came up with something called the focal infection theory, which is now largely challenged or rejected completely by the modern day American Dental Association. And I kind of asked why, if there was some prominent research, which we'll uncover here in a minute, and it comes to similar issues we've seen in conventional medicine. It's usually a conflict of interest, and it's usually incentives. Things like root canals are really profitable procedures, and we seem to have this meme in modern dentistry that they are 98% effective and they're totally safe. And what I'm about to share with you highlights that that might not be the case. So a few important points that Dr. Price kind of alluded, and I'm not a dentist, of course, so I'm just sharing some of his findings, is that root canals can harbor pathogenic anaerobic bacteria. So anaerobic means they don't need the presence of oxygen, and a tooth is a dead organ, or it's a dead bone, or it's a blend of one of those. And if any other organ in your body died, necrosis, then if you left it in the body, it would cause problems. You would have sepsis, you would have bacterial poisoning. But with teeth, we do this root canal thing and we think we can fix it. And what he found is that we usually are looking in the wrong place. There's one predominant nerve, or we think we can put this putty in people's gums and it stops the bacteria. They sterilize the tooth and all is well and good. But if you look at the tooth and the structure of a tooth, that there's actually many of these kind of highways, if you will, these tubules, which become bacterial inoculation sites for some of this dangerous bacteria to really proliferate and percolate. And this bacteria, he theorized, was most problematic for the heart. He also said it was very problematic as it grew and grew and grew and inoculated more and more and more, that it could cause things like autoimmune diseases, heart diseases, brain conditions, and all other manner of things. So he set about studying this. And one of the really fascinating things that he came up with is when he was seeing patients come to him with issues, he would take away the tooth, he would extract the tooth, he would swab the tooth, and then he would give the swab to an animal in some way, shape, or form. In some cases, it was a liquid culture. In other cases, it was a tiny fragment of the actual tooth that he would make a small incision in the animal. He would insert it. And he would reliably, almost 100% of the time, be able to give the animal the same malaise, the same disease, the same problems that the human counterpart was suffering from. So in this case here, I wrote down a little case study. He had a patient that was suffering severe arthritis. She was in a wheelchair. She walked with a cane. He implanted the tooth that he extracted from her in a healthy rabbit, and within 48 hours, the rabbit was crippled with arthritis. Once the tooth was removed from the patient, her arthritis improved dramatically. This clearly suggests that the presence of the infected tooth was a causative agent for both that patient's disease and that patient's rehabilitation, and then giving the rabbit the arthritis. It continued to pique Dr. Price's curiosity to the point where he was now getting cadavers of dead bodies that had died that you could confirm had had a root canal, a heart attack. So he would pull out the tooth, he would swab, he would inoculate the rabbit again through various means, and he could reliably make the animal die from the same condition as the human condition died from, because of this bacterial or the toxins that are present in that causing the same kind of manifestation of dis-ease or symptoms in the body. So it's kind of crazy that he was celebrated for this, and then quickly kind of this information was buried. And really the problem here is that root canals can't fully sterilize the teeth. These accessory canals again become hotspots really of bacterial contamination. And in that is the dead tissue, and in that is the toxins, and in that is the bacteria. So we really have to ask the question, as I think the American Dental Association now do something crazy like 100 million root canals per year. Just learning this, I think about my dad, who I know had a root canal, and talks about how painful and not nice that procedure was. I don't want to scare him with this, but I've probably got to share some notes with him after the show, that we have to square the circle of, is this what we should be doing? Is root canal actually, one of those simple solutions that we seem to be throwing at something, but it's causing all kinds of unintended consequences that are undesirable, could potentially be leading to disease? Like the question asker here said, she's been suffering miserably with all manner of things for 5.5 years since the root canal. It certainly has strong links to autoimmune diseases and developmental issues, neurological conditions. Now, granted, technology moves very fast and there is some promising things. I saw some healthy pushback against Price's work now because we're 100 years removed from that, and things like ozone therapy or better sterilization techniques are coming into the fray. But at the same time, I think there's swaths of people, potentially hundreds of millions of people that have had root canals that are now living with something dead and decaying inside of their mouth that is harboring an enormous amount of bacteria and toxins, which is affecting and slowly poisoning the surrounding tissues. They took blood and bone from the surrounding site of where the necrosis was occurring at the tooth, and it was showing 400% increases in bacterial contamination than that would be normal. And there's a lot of bacteria in the mouth. It's a site of, I guess, the first stage of your digestion and your microbiome, but this was pathogenic bacteria. So some really interesting stuff there that the Weston A. Price Foundation, that is still currently headed up by important figures like Sally Fallon Morell, they're continuing to carry the torch. If you go to their website and you look at the blog posts, that you can find some very interesting information, and there's people that are continuing to spread the word of Weston A. Price's book, which is for sale. I looked, it's $120 on Amazon right now, so it's hard to get a hold of. But other people have bought that. They've consolidated this information that I'm giving you just a glimpse into and highlighting the potential dangers of root canal. So I'm sorry that you are suffering with that, Math. There are on the Weston A. Price Foundation blog posts ways in which you can resolve this, and it seems to be down the path of a biological dentist that understands what they are dealing with, that is usually going to look like actual removal of the tooth and then sterilization of all the canals. And if you want to go for something like a replacement, something that's more ceramic, or a good old gold tooth if you want to look like a pirate in the future. So that's my current understanding of it. Thanks for sending me down that rabbit hole, because it was quite illuminating and quite shocking. And another prime example of where we mess with nature, at the start of that being that we're not eating the foods that nature intended, which is causing the problem in the first place. You know, teeth don't just fall out of our head. We don't just get dead teeth and dead nerves if something else isn't causing injury first. And it's what Weston A. Price identified many, many years ago. It's usually missing the fat-soluble vitamins, the A, D, E, K. And guess where they're found? In animal products, in the most amounts in things like organ meats, in things like raw meat, which again validates our stance on nutritional understanding that these are the foods that should be prioritized. And it's the introduction of modern food that leads people to the point where they need a root canal. But this solution seems to be a band-aid over a bullet wound, and maybe we need to be readdressing that. So thank you for the question, Meath. Trevocado. Cool username. How to pick the right path when you are at a huge fork in the road. Yeah, this is a tricky one, because this is kind of the beautiful burden, the blessing and the curse, if you will, of having a human mind. Firstly, you ask, how can you pick the right path? And when we're asking that, we're kind of at this fork in the road. Is it left? Is it right? Do I stay? Do I go? Is it up? Is it down? Is it yes? Is it no? And the issue with that, and this is where the analysis paralysis kicks in for most people, because they are trying to make the, quote, right decision, they overthink a lot of the time. And trying to think your way out of an overthinking problem is like trying to drink your way out of an alcoholism problem. You kind of trapped in this Chinese finger trap that the more you pull, aka the more you think, the more you overthink, the tighter you get sucked into this thing. And it's, again, a wonderful thing that we have a brain that can imagine a compelling future for ourselves, and it can tell stories about what the future looks like, but it opens up an enormous amount of loops. And our brain abhors an open loop, because if I say, okay, I go this way, well, that simultaneously means I'm entertaining all of the possibilities that come with going this way and reconciling the loss of what it means to not go the other way. And sometimes that is really difficult, because we don't know. We cannot predict the future. And this is kind of the baseline operating system of the brain. It's a prediction and protection machine. It's trying to protect you from any kind of failure or death at a kind of, dramatic level, because that's what the brain is doing. It's a survival mechanism. It doesn't care about you thriving. It cares about you surviving. And those two are very, very different. So it's trying to predict the future to protect you from being disappointed. And then what happens is, because people don't know, because they can't know, because they can't predict the future, they make the third choice, which is to do nothing. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait until I can figure this thing out. I'm going to wait until I'm ready, or I feel ready. What a lot of people don't realize is that is a choice. Doing nothing is still doing something. And it's usually very, very costly. The cost of inaction is usually greater than the cost of action, even if it turns out that you took the left when you should have taken the right, because at least in taking the left, you get feedback and you actually know. If you took right or you took left and you listened to your intuition and it guided you well and it's, green lights all the way, that's amazing. But there's only one way to find out, and it's to go one direction. Standing still is very, very costly. So one of the reframes that I heard Douglas Murray, I think it came from, talk about a year ago, and it impacted me profoundly with decisions like this when you're at a proverbial fork in the road, is he said, you must choose your regrets in life. You must choose your regrets in life. And when I sat with that for a minute, it caused me to ponder something, which is, I think we feel as humans like if we make all of the right decisions that we won't have regrets. So minimizing regret is all about making the perfect decision. But because of the issues that I just brought up, it's really hard to make the perfect decision because you just don't know. So now we're stuck. We're in fear and scarcity, analysis paralysis. And in fact, all of us have regrets. Almost every human I know, I would say every human I know, has some level of regret about some things, or maybe many things, which means that regret isn't a bug in the game of life. It's a feature. We have to have some regret because we chose to go left when we should have gone right. We said yes when we should have said no, and we learn from them. It's not about guilt or blame and shame. But if we reconcile that we have regret and the fact that we'll probably have regret in the future, then we come back to this. Well, choose your regrets in life. Ask yourself, play it out over the long run. Put yourself in the rocking chair and your retirement age, and you're looking back at this moment in your life right now, this fork in the road you have left or right. Which regret could you live with? Because you will live with one of them. Would you regret doing the thing and failing more than you would regret not doing the thing and playing it safe? This is a really interesting conundrum to wrestle with, because I think we can outsource our own wisdom from a future self by knowing that, when I sit with that, going left might be bigger or scarier, but I feel like I'll have less regret because I tried. And if I try and fail, I'll feel better with myself than if I never try at all and have to live with the eternal loop of never knowing. And I think that's usually what this comes down to. There's often, when we're at a fork in the road, there's often a risk. There's something like the juxtaposition between a peaceful slavery to take the safe path and a dangerous freedom to do what your soul is calling you to do, but what the world, or maybe even the people around you, will tell you you are crazy if you do. But I would rather be free and living dangerously every day of the week over choosing what is peaceful and safe, because I don't think we are here to be peaceful and safe. I feel like we came here, we have an adventure, and it's the adventure of our lives to try and find that thing that lights us up. And it's usually the scarier thing, of course. And that usually comes with the doubts and the fear. And it's usually why most people don't do it. And that's usually why most people die with a lot of regrets of, man, when I had that opportunity, God, I wish I'd have done it. Nobody regrets playing it safer. Nobody when they get to the end of life, they're not saying, I wish I worked more overtime, or I wish I'd have done more of that safe stuff. They're saying things like, I wish I'd taken that travel opportunity. I wish I'd have said, I love you more to the people I care about. I wish I'd have risked it all. I wish I'd have joined the band and pursued my dreams driving through the EU and seeing what happened because of that. So just remember that you often will regret more the things that you didn't do and the open loops that occur as a cause of playing out this imaginative what if. And the only way to minimize that is to do it. And when you don't know, I would argue that you always know. But it's not the head, because that's the fear factory. That's the scarcity place. That's trying to predict the future with maps of the past, which never works. The place in you that knows is something else, whether it's your heart, whether it's your intuition, whether it's your gut feeling, whether it's grabbing a hold of your cojones. Who knows what that language is for you, but it's not going to be a decision of logic a lot of the time. It's going to be a decision of courage. It's going to be a decision of trust. And there are tools that can get you there, whether that's prayer, meditation, journaling, gratitude, talking to mentors, and just listening to the deep wisdom that you have within yourself. I think your intuition will guide you right, because it's the only thing that ever has guided you right. So good luck with that decision there, Trev. Let us know how it goes, man. Next up, we have a question from Sophie, who asked, aspects in which men can step up and support their pregnant wife or partner. Yeah, this is something that I've gone through a couple of times with my wife now. Most recently, we just have a 4-ish month-old baby, so this is kind of fresh on my mind. And one of the greatest roles, I believe, in a healthy relationship, the masculine and the feminine, as the feminine is growing this blessing, this baby, they are creating life inside of them. They are getting bigger week by week. They are going through different trimesters and struggles. And you are not, as the man, as the partner, you are not going through any of that. You are going through it with them. But but it's very hard to reconcile what that feels like. It's so hard to comprehend what it would be like to see your body gain 40 pounds and change and grow life and be connected to that. So sometimes I think men, and admittedly, feel kind of useless and stupid. We're just kind of like, what do I do? And I just guess I'll keep her fed and give her a foot rub once in a while. And those things will go a long way. Keep your woman fed and give her a foot rub when she needs it. But I think energetically speaking, there's this idea in energy dynamics that the feminine, whilst it is strong and unbelievably powerful, hence its ability to create all the life on the planet, really wants to have the safety of the masculine to surrender into, because that's kind of like the warm embrace of like, I've got you. When somebody is pregnant, especially a first-time mom, and they're going through this, it's probably going to bring up a lot, I imagine, a lot of fear about what this is going to be like, the fear that the body is changing, what's going to happen afterwards. Maybe they have a birth plan and they're worried about making sure that goes the right way. Meanwhile, you've got this guy over here that is hopefully sharing in that process and can just be a rock, be a pillar, be the kind of energy that grabs the feminine by the shoulders, grounds them a little bit and says, hey, you got this. You are designed to do this, and I'm going to hold you through this, and I can do that. What do you need from me? I think a big thing is, yes, being proactive. And if you see your partner struggling, stepping up and minimizing discomfort and offering the foot rub and cooking them meals and doing extra special things to make them feel seen, loved, and appreciated as they're going through this transformative thing. But also ask. You know, as men, we're quite simple sometimes. And I think a lot of times in relationships where we get ourselves in trouble is we think about what they should be doing in our heads. We're like, oh, he should know that. He should be doing this for me and he's not doing it. But like I said, we're pretty simple sometimes. We need it quite black and white and quite mapped out. So men, if you're listening to this, ask, how can I support you more right now? What do you need from me? What are your needs and how could I better meet them? Women, don't be afraid of asking your man for this. Men want to feel useful. And a lot of the times, especially the first go around, men feel kind of useless. They feel like they don't know what to do, what to say, how to be. And they've never been a dad before either. And you could argue that it's much less kind of programmed into our gene keys on how to do that. It's a steeper learning curve. So we're kind of like these, dumb buffoons running around just hoping, our wife stays happy. Like if you make a direct request of your man and state it and he can do that and then you can celebrate him, he's going to feel so good because he wants to feel useful. He wants to feel like the protector and provider that he's trying to actualize. So men, you need a bit of that proactivity. You need to step up. You need to have the awareness. And I think you're only going to have that awareness to the degree that you have the awareness with your own self. Are you being introspective, or are you running around like a headless chicken? And I get it, life is stressful and you're probably working long, hard days and you're probably trying to shore up the security for this future family that you're building, and that comes with a lot of stress. But you've also got a partner here who's going through something equally, if not more so stressful, certainly bigger. It's we men, you'll see it over and over again, say the women are the real MVPs. And when a man has watched a woman go through that and been able to witness that and see it, it's humbling. It's so humbling. It comes with an awful lot of humility that we know, damn, we couldn't do that. You gals are incredible and powerful, and we need to celebrate that and honor it. So I think being emotionally available, being emotionally vulnerable without bleeding that vulnerability onto the wife, onto with fears, so it's destabilizing, is very, very important. Having the awareness and communicating honestly. I know it's kind of cliche and I know it's kind of boring to say, but it's extremely valuable and it hosts a whole lot of truth. Communication is key. Don't be afraid to ask your man for what they need. Men, if you're listening to this, please ask your woman what she needs and love on her. She's going to be a little bit tender. She's going to be getting a lot bigger. She's not going to be moving around as much. Keep her hydrated. Get her some electrolyte packs. Cook her some delicious food and make sure you are just being attentive, caring, and loving whilst you are also going through this journey yourself. It's an initiatory journey for both the father and the mother. There is nothing that will shake you up and force you to grow up as quick as becoming a father. So make sure you're just trying to ready yourself for that a little bit. Spend some time thinking about this. Don't just sit there at night, play video games and scroll hole on your phone until you fall asleep. Carve out some intentional time. Put pen to paper. Ask yourself, what kind of father do you want to be? What kind of husband do you want to be? And how do you want to leave your mark on this world by how you imprint onto your children? Because you will. Your children are walking in your shadow. They're walking in your path, and you want to make sure that hopefully you're leading them down a good path. So just a few things to think about there. It's an incredible journey. It's a challenging one. It's a scary one sometimes, but it's beautiful and it's meaningful. And I think if we just have more conversations like this, we'll hopefully navigate it just a little bit better and realize we are all in this together. And it takes a village, it takes a tribe. So unite that core unit right there off the bat. Next question is from Brett. A little context with this one. He is a chef. He posts to Instagram a bunch, and he's always sharing his delightful animal-based recipes and talking about foodstuffs. Not fearing red meat, for example, eating lots of eggs and protein. And with that territory, he has a lot of conversations, and this leads into his question. So Brett Smith asked, what is a good strategy to steer the conversation into using the knowledge we have in this space into something positive and something that friends or family members can take away learning something from, whilst not coming across as an asshole or a know-it-all? So thank you, Brett. It's a great question. And this probably ails us all to some degree. If we start to find something that really works for us to fix our health, like the animal-based diet, and we improve our health, and sometimes, like in my case, reverse health issues, you kind of come a bit preachy about it, right? You want to yell it from the rooftops, like, everybody should be doing this. Everybody get your raw milk jugs, eat your liver, eat your protein, double middle finger to the seed oils. And what I learned the hard way, I would argue, is the more I pushed people away. And that was hard because when I initially started to learn this stuff, I had no dreams of grandeur about becoming a coach or hosting a podcast. I just wanted to share what I was learning, and naturally I wanted to share it with the people I was close to. So I wanted to share it with my mum and my dad, who'd always had struggles with their health. But I kind of came at it from maybe a little bit of a inexperienced, youthful, boisterous energy of like, you got to do this. We're all going to do this. This is going to fix everything. It's going to change the world. It's going to fix your 30-year-long battle with your body image. It's going to fix it all. And I drove them further away. And I learned eventually in the long run that it was when I stopped pushing that I invited them to come in with curiosity. And I think curiosity is the key in this conundrum. There's the old adage that you can't lead a horse to water. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But I would add an addendum to that, which is you can make the horse thirsty, or you can make it curious at the very least. And the way you do that is you lead to the water, and then you lead by example. You show that in the face of pushback against this message, but Brett, you're posting all of this red meat and the NIH and the CDC and the latest Netflix vegan documentary says that's going to give you diabetes and clog your arteries. What's going on? That you don't need the information as much sometimes as the example of your health, your vibrancy, your journey. Like, where were you 5 years ago, a year ago before you found this? Did you lose 10, 15, 20 pounds? Did you reverse autoimmune conditions? Because this is the story we hear over and over and over again. And actions or results speak louder than words in my experience. And people have been largely misled by most of the nutritional institutions that we have to be pushed more towards a plant-based future, a plant-based agenda, at least from the 50s. With the Ansel Keys debacle, we've had a fear of saturated fat and fat in general, the low-fat craze that came with that. The red meat is dangerous, cholesterol clogs your arteries. So we've been battered over the head for decades at this point with anti-meat rhetoric. And to have somebody that is not a doctor, that is not a PhD, that is not a nutritionist, but some guy that just cooks delicious looking food saying, oh, ignore all of that, this is how we should eat, is obviously sometimes going to be met with resistance because people love authority. And frankly, you're not an authority, and I'm not. And this is the feedback and the pushback that we'll get a lot of the time. But you're not a doctor. What are your credentials? And to that, I would say, well, my credentials are I've helped hundreds and hundreds of people reverse those same conditions I was just talking about, whether they've lost 100 pounds, 50 pounds, 20 pounds, reverse autoimmune conditions, live their best life. They're my credentials. I don't need to have this, title in front of my name that makes me an ultimate arbiter of the capital T truth or doctors. Well, you have to also admit that many of the institutions that these people are coming from are inherently flawed, broken, coerced from the inside out by conflicts of interest, and they're operating on old data that is clearly skewed with an anti-meat narrative. And that's why sometimes arguing over facts won't really get you anywhere. And even if you quote unquote win the argument because you're a better debater, you usually only win the argument at the expense of alienating the person that you are trying to convince of your ideas, which doesn't convince them of your ideas. It just drives them further into the belief system. That's why I've learned the hard way to not argue so much with people on the internet anymore. If a vegan wants to come to my page and tell me what I'm doing is terrible and it's going to cause me to get sick and it's awful for the environment and the animals, I just kind of like them, thank you for boosting my algorithm, and wish them well, because my lived experience is anything but that. My understanding is but that. Now, I could get into an internet fight with them or a little friendly discussion over the dinner table in real life. But what I've found is a lot of the time, it's just easier to live it, breathe it, show it, make the horse curious, and then they will ask you the questions. When they are asking you the questions, now the door is open. They are receptive to learning. The belief system that they were previously trapped inside of has a little crack. And when they ask you, they are looking, they are curious, they are seeking, and then you can give the truth. But if they are just coming at you with, eating all of that red meat is going to give you cancer, or it's going to cause your colon to fall out your bum hole, they've already made the mind up. And you can just say, well, there's conflicting evidence on that, to say the least. And if anything, me eating this way has improved my lifestyle dramatically. And maybe you say, check out this guy, or check out that girl, or go watch Radical Health Radio, or check out Dr. Paul Saladino. Or you just say, this is working for me and I feel healthier and I look better than I ever have in my life. So I really appreciate the sentiment here of wanting to spread this message. I think it's really important. Just focus on doing what you're doing with your Instagram page and with your shares, and know that you'll be magnetic to some and they will really resonate and jive with that message, and you'll be repulsive to others and they'll think you're an animal murdering monster who's going to cause the destruction of the rainforest, and they'll probably never change their mind, hopefully, unless they, go into some kind of health malaise themselves and now have to fix themselves, as is often the case for vegans returning back to the animal-based way of eating, because we very rarely see it go the other way, right? I actually don't know if I've ever seen a story of an animal-based eater going to vegan, but I've seen countless, hordes, hundreds of plant-based eaters reverting back to the proper human diet, because it is the proper human diet. So come at it with love, come at it with curiosity, come at it with an open mind. Still, even if you're so convinced of this way of eating, as am I, don't think that you know the capital T truth, because nobody really does. And a closed mind is a death sentence. Your mind is like a parachute. It only works when it's open. So go in sometimes assuming that you are wrong, because at least that opens you up to learning something new. You are steel manning a person's arguments as opposed to straw manning them. Straw man is propping up a weak argument and then knocking it down. A steel man is understanding that I'm going to make their arguments better than they can make them, to understand them at a deeper level. And usually in the process of steel manning something you don't necessarily agree with, it only fortifies your own belief, because you've kind of ironed out all of the nuance there. So those are just some philosophical things to think about as it comes to communicating with different dietary ideologies, of which they have all become isms and borderline religions, and people will defend those to the death. And sometimes you just got to let them do it. Let your example be what speaks louder than any of that. And our last question from today comes from Charles. Charles Sewers? I hope that's right. What's your take on how one might interact with plant medicines in a healthy way? Well, I'm glad you said in a healthy way, because I think that whilst plant medicines are having a resurgence in the consciousness for a reason, because they are helping people deal with all manner of things, whether it's just, a negative mindset, anxiety, even to the much bigger things that some people go through in life, which can be traumatic events, reshaping those. And you see the growing number of evidence-based research facilities that are popping up all over the place now. Johns Hopkins in London, there's colleges in the United States that are studying things like MDMA-assisted therapy, psilocybin-assisted therapy, and showing all manner of dramatic, remarkable improvements with soldiers with extreme PTSD and trauma, with cancer diagnosed people who are in stage 4 and they are almost certainly going to die soon. It helps them reconcile their relationship to death and live their last days, weeks, months with less fear and more acceptance. So there's clearly something that is happening with the use of plant medicines that is allowing us to, again, assist therapy, whether this is guided with a person or whether it is like therapizing ourselves in some ways, like using plant medicines as a way to swallow the therapist, if you will, to tap you into the wise self that lives within you, to allow you to disassociate from the stories. And this is probably one of the most explored and profound mechanisms of all of the researchers that have looked into what plant medicines are actually doing. It is temporarily, for the time that you are in that experience, turning off the default mode network, which is a fancy way of saying the ego goes away. And the ego is your sense of I. It's how you orient yourself in the world. But if you are so identified with that sense of I, that voice in your head, the thoughts, feelings, tastes, emotions, etc., and you believe that's who you are, then you combine in with your stories, you combine with your thoughts, and these operate predominantly from this default mode network, which plant medicines can lower the volume of or deactivate it entirely. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, I am not the voice in my head. I am the one who hears it. I am not my past. I am not my traumas. I am not my stories. I am a person that has experienced things, but I'm not even necessarily my mind. And I'm not my body. Maybe I'm something else. Maybe I'm something like a spiritual creature / being or soul that's having a human experience instead of the more materialistic view of consciousness and our thoughts and everything that we experience is purely the result of having a body. And that's quite profound because so often what is dramatically impacting a person's mental health and their ability to move forward in life is some kind of thing that is stuck to them, like an energetic residue from the past. The mind has decided the way the world is based on the experiences that they have gone through, which have been formative. But those formative experiences has clouded their judgment of what the world is. And that is why it's often said that we don't see the world as it is, but as we are. That perception is reality. That if my perception of the world is that it is cruel and unkind and unjust, that all I will see is the unkind, unjust nature of the world. And that because we have such cognitive dissonance and because we have self-righteousness, i.e. we want to be right, if I've decided that this is the way it is, then I want to be right. So I'll look for all the evidence that confirms that belief and I'll ignore the evidence that runs contrary to it, even if that belief is not serving me or helping me. And something like plant medicines can help flip that entire thing on its head. It can really profoundly shake the snow globe of the way you see the world, the way you see yourself, the way you see your past, the way you see your future. It can rekindle your relationship to the divine, to God, to source, to spirit. It can help you heal things. It can help you remember things that you didn't even realize were holding such weight over you. And the reason I can speak to this is because that has been my experience. And the caveat here is that it's not wise, I don't believe, for somebody that has not done the prerequisite work with things like deep introspection, contemplation, journaling, meditation, prayer, to willy-nilly approach plant medicines and say, oh, that sounds great, I'm going to go do all of that. Because when you ingest the plant medicines, whether this is going to Peru and do an ayahuasca or, taking some of your dodgy friends' mushrooms and sitting in your front room, you are opening the shutter doors of your subconscious mind. And you have to have some kind of belief and control and self-regulating tools that you're okay with what comes out of there. Because some of what comes out of there is going to be heavy and it might be dark, and to the point where you might not even remember what is going to come out of those doors because your body protected you against that memory because it was so traumatic. This happens time and time again. And this is why it is very, very wise, if you are pondering or you are being called by the plants, to seek a teacher, to seek a therapist that is well versed in these tools and techniques, to go to healing centers that do this professionally, that have done this professionally, and they use medicine men of certain lineages and tribes, that this is all that they've done their whole life. Yes, they might not have the Western credentials of doctor, but they are doctors of the jungle. They are doctors of the souls and spirits, and they know how to do high-level alchemical surgery. And if you don't have the care and attention of somebody like that, then you can potentially be playing with fire. There are people, countless people, that have been healed remarkably from plant medicines. And they're the stories we hear. There are many, many people that have been hurt by plant medicines because they didn't approach them with the respect and reverence that they deserve. They didn't design ceremony. They didn't set an intention. They didn't think about this stuff. And then you hear it, right? Your friend's funny story now of the bad trip because the set and setting was not curated. They didn't think much about it. Maybe they were young and dumb and they was like, oh yeah, look, I'll eat 3 grams of mushrooms and go to the concert. And the set and the setting is terrible. The setting is you're at a concert around all of these other energetic bodies that you're going to be tapping into and picking up and feeling. The set is, there's no intention there. You just think you're going to have a good time. And all of a sudden you see like visions that are scary and you can't run away and you've got this fear and you're stuck. That's not a good experience for anyone, and it can be re-traumatizing. So you have to be very, very careful. So yes, I can be one of the biggest advocates and proponents of plant medicines because they profoundly changed my life. And I mean that with my whole heart. I don't know that I would be who I am, where I am, doing what I do, living how I live, able to love the way that I love or think the way that I think if it was not for plant medicines, because they changed me a lot. And I'm also aware that I approached them in a very timely manner. I waited until the experience and the timing was right. And I had a teacher and I had a guide, and I treated these things like the high level surgery with the level of respect that they need. So you can absolutely use these in a healthy way, and you can absolutely use these in an unhealthy way. And I think what separates the medicine from the drug is the intention. These things are called plant medicines, but these things can also be used as drugs. They can be used by people to just get high. And that is not what you're doing here. When you take a plant medicine, you are not getting high. You are trying to sit with yourself, to work through something, to create a better, more hopeful vision for your own future, to answer deep existential questions like the one earlier in this podcast. I'm at a fork in the road, left or right, I don't know. Sometimes these are the kind of teachers, tools, and allies that can appear on our path. Certainly not for everyone, but for some. And if you are called, then I think the respect and the reverence is the biggest thing that you can think about here. Find a teacher, find a guide, find a place that you feel absolutely comfortable with, and go slow and just hold the utmost respect and really prepare for this mentally, physically, spiritually, and then they will steer you in the right direction. But they are a double-edged sword, and they will sting and they will cut if you do not treat them with the respect that they deserve. So good luck on your journey, my friend. Anyway, folks, that's it for today's episode. Thank you for those beautiful and wide-ranging questions. I hope there was something in there for each one of you listening, and we appreciate you as always. We'll see you next week on the show. Peace out, friends. Stay radical. All right, friends, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Radical Health Radio. We got a fresh new podcast for you every Wednesday. If you enjoyed the show, consider liking, subscribing, reviewing, and rating us on your podcast platform. It helps to spread this message of radical health. We'll see you next week.